Bridge building between Christian and Muslim. All grace is due to God, creator and sustainer of the universe. And I bear witness that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is his servant, messenger, and the seal of all the prophets and messengers in history. May God's peace and blessing be upon them all. With nearly more than 1 billion followers each, Islam and Christianity are major religions that influence the thinking and values of over 40% of the world population. While there are theological differences, some of which might be significant, there are nonetheless other important areas of belief that are shared by both communities: belief in God, or Allah, belief in revelation, in prophets, in the holy books of God, in the life hereafter, and in a divinely inspired moral code organizing and regulating human life during our earthly journey to eternity. Muslim-Christian dialogue. For the Muslim, constructive dialogue is not only permitted, it is commendable. In the Quran we read, "Say, O people of the book," a term which particularly refers to Jews and Christians, "come to common terms as between us and you, that we worship none but God, that we associate no partners with him in his powers and divine attributes, that we erect not from among ourselves lords and patrons other than God. If then they turn back, say you to bear witness that we are Muslims, bowing to the will of God." Quran 3 hours 64 minutes. The methodology of that dialogue is also explained in the Quran. Invite all to the way of your Lord with wisdom and beautiful exhortation, and argue with them in ways that are best. Quran 16 to 125. And if you argue with the people of the book, then argue only in the kindest way, except with those among them who are unjust, and say, "We believe in what was revealed to us and in what was revealed to you. Our God and your God is one, and we are submissive to him." Quran 29:46. A prerequisite for any constructive dialogue is that both communities should not learn about each other through sources that are unsympathetic, critical, or even hostile. They should rather try to formulate an honest idea as to how the other faith is seen in its own authentic scriptures, and as practiced by those who are truly committed to it. This need is even more significant in the case of the Muslim-Christian dialogue. The average Christian has heard of or has read about Islam mostly through writers who have had colonial or missionary motives, which might have given a certain slant to their interpretation of Islam to the Western mind. While I admit that my own practice of Islam is far from perfect, I at least speak from the vantage point of someone who wants to think of himself as a committed, practicing Muslim. Now I'd like to share with you 5 basic areas, consideration of which is imperative in any Christian-Muslim understanding: the meaning of the term Islam, the meaning of the term God, the nature of the human, the relationship between the human and God, the question of accountability, and finally, some conclusions pertaining to bridge building between Muslims and Christians. Meaning of Islam. Taking the term Islam, it is important to emphasize that it is not derived from the name of any particular person, race, or locality. A Muslim considers the term used by some writers, Mohammedanism, to be an offensive violation of the very spirit of Islamic teaching. The Prophet Muhammad, may God praise his mention, is not worshipped, not is he regarded the founder of Islam or the author of its holy book, the Quran. The term Islam is given in more than one place in the Quran itself. It is derived from the Arabic root SLM, which connotes peace and submission. Indeed, the proper meaning of Islam is the attainment of peace, both inner and outer peace, by submission of oneself, the will of God. And when we say submit, we are talking about conscious, loving, and trusting submission to the will of God, the acceptance of His grace, and the following of His path. In that sense, the Muslim regards the term Islam not as an innovation that came in the 7th century Christian era, with the advent of the Prophet Muhammad, but as the basic mission of all the prophets throughout history. That universal mission was finally culminated and perfected in the last of these prophets, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. Islamic monotheism. The next essential concept that needs to be clarified is the term Allah. What does it mean? It should be emphasized first that the term Allah has no connotation at all of a tribal god, an Arabian or even a Muslim god. The term Allah in Arabic simply means the one and only true, universal God of all. To think that Allah is different from God, with a capital G, is no more valid than saying the French Christians worship a different God because they call him Dieu. What are the basic attributes of God? The Quran mentions the most beautiful names, or attributes, of God. Instead of enumerating them all, let's examine a few. Some attributes emphasize the transcendence of God. The Quran repeatedly makes it clear that God is beyond our limited perception. There is nothing whatever comparable unto him. Quran 42:11, no vision can grasp him, but his grasp is over all vision. Quran 6:103, a Muslim never thinks of God as having any particular image, whether physical, human, material, or otherwise. Such attributes as the perfectly knowing, the eternal, the omnipotent, the omnipresent, the just, and the sovereign also emphasize transcendence. But this does not mean in any way that for the Muslim God is a mere philosophical concept or a deity far removed. Indeed, alongside this emphasis on the transcendence of God, the Quran also talks about God as personal, a God who is close, easily approachable, loving, forgiving, and merciful. The very first passage in the Quran, which is repeated dozens of times, is in the name of God, most gracious and most merciful. The Quran tells us that when God created the first human, he breathed into him something of his spirit. Quran 32:9, and that God is closer to the human than his jugular vein. Quran 50:16. In another beautiful and moving passage we are told, when my servants ask you, Muhammad, concerning me, then surely I am near to them. I listen to every suppliant who calls on me. Let them respond to my call and obey my command that they may follow the right way. Quran 2:186. For the Muslim, monotheism does not mean simply the unity of God, because there can be different persons in unity. Monotheism in Islam is the absolute oneness and uniqueness of God, which precludes the notion of persons sharing in Godhead. The opposite of monotheism in Islam is called Arabic shirk, association of others with God. This includes not only polytheism, but also dualism, believing in one God for good or light and another for evil or darkness. The concept of a shirk also includes pantheism, the idea that God is in everything. All forms of God incarnate philosophies are excluded by Islam's monotheism as a blind obedience to dictators, to clergy, or to one's own whims and desires. These all are regarded as forms of associating other with God, shirk, whether by believing that such creatures of God possess divinity or by believing that they share the divine attributes of God. It should be added that, to the Muslim, monotheism is not simply a dogma. Islam's pure, pristine, and strict monotheism is much more than a thought or a belief. It is something that deeply influences the Muslim's whole outlook on life. Nature of the human. We have talked about God. What about you and me? Who is the human being? Who are you and I? And why are we here on earth? The Quran teaches that we humans are created of three components. We are created from clay, representing the material or carnal element. We are endowed with intellect that is God-given to be used, not to be put on the shelf. Reason may be insufficient, but it is not the antitheses of faith, whither. And thirdly, we are endowed the Spirit of God, which He breathed into us. Quran 32:7 and 15:29. The Muslim does not see human exist here on earth as punishment for eating from the forbidden tree. That event is regarded as an experiential lesson for Adam and Eve before they came to earth. The Quran teaches that even before the creation of the first human, it was God's plan to establish human life and civilization on earth. Quran 2:30. Thus, the Muslim does not view the human as all evil, nor as all good, but rather as responsible. It is stated in several places in the Quran that God created the human to be His Khalifa, His trustee or deputy on earth. Humankind's basic trust, our responsibility, is to worship God. Worship for the Muslim is not only engaging in formal rituals, but it is any activity in accordance with the will of God for the benefit of oneself and of humanity at large. Thus the Muslim views the earth, its resources and ecology as a gift from God to humans to harness and use in fulfillment of the trust for which we shall all be held responsible. That is why the Quran speaks highly of learning. The first work revealed of the Quran was recites or read. As long as they were true to their faith and to Quranic injunctions about learning, Muslims established a civilization that saw great advances in science and in the humanities. Not only did they preserve earlier scientific heritage, but they also added to it and paved the way for European Renaissance. When Muslims again become true to their faith, such history is bound to repeat itself. God-humankind relationship. We talked of God and of humankind. Now we must ask what the basic relationship is. The Quran teaches us that the human race is given an innate pure nature called fitra. Knowledge of God and innate spirituality are inherent in human existence, but this spirituality can betray us if it is not led in the right direction. To depend on a merely human feeling of the guiding spirit is dangerous. Man groups, even cults, claim to be guided by the Spirit or by God or by revelation, yet these groups hold divergent, even contradictory, beliefs. We find people behaving in contradictory ways who claim nonetheless that each is doing the will of God. I feel, they say, that the Spirit guides and directs me. A credible source of revelation is imperative. Throughout history, God has selected particular individuals to convey His message, to receive His revelation and exemplify it for mankind. For some of these prophets, holy books or scriptures were given revealing God's commands and guidance. For most of you, the names of these prophets found in the Quran will sound familiar: Noah, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, David, Solomon, John the Baptist, Jesus, and, finally, the last prophet, Muhammad. May God praise their mentions. These prophets carried the same basic message. Not an apostle did we send before you without this inspiration sent by us to him, that there is no God but I, therefore worship and serve me. Quran 21:25. Further, the Quran insists on calling all those prophets Muslims, because a Muslim is one who submits to the will of God. Their followers are called Muslims as well. Thus it is an article of faith for a Muslim to believe in all these prophets. Indeed, Muslims are warned that anyone who accepts some prophets and rejects others, in fact rejects them all. For a Muslim, to believe in Moses while rejecting Jesus or Muhammad is against the very teaching of Moses. And to believe in Jesus but reject Moses or Muhammad is to violate what Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad stood for. For a Muslim to believe in Muhammad and reject either Moses or Jesus is to violate his own holy book. those who deny God and his apostles, and those who wish to separate God from his apostles, saying, "We believe in some but reject others," and those who wish to take a course midway. They are in truth equally unbelievers, and we have prepared for unbelievers a humiliating punishment. Quran 4:150-151. Recognition of all prophets is an article of faith, not a mere social courtesy or diplomatic statement. I do hope that with open minds, open hearts, and further careful, honest study there may be more such mutual recognition. The special role of Muhammad. But why do Muslims in their testimony of faith say, "I bear witness that there is no God but God and that Muhammad is his messenger"? Does that mean that they in fact reject other prophets? Indeed, the special role played by Muhammad as the seal and last of all the prophets puts the Muslim in the position whereby honoring Muhammad implies honoring those who came before him as well. Muslims are warned not to make fanatical or parochial distinctions between prophets, Quran 2:285. But the Quran also says that God has favored some prophets with more significant gifts or role than others. Quran 17:55. All are brothers, although the only prophet with the universal mission to all humankind is Muhammad. May God praise his mention. Quran 25:11. The Muslim believes not only that Muhammad is a brother to Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and other prophets, but the Quran states in clear terms that the advent of Muhammad was foretold by previous prophets, including Moses and Jesus, peace be upon them. Quran 7:157, 61:6. Even the Bible in its present form clearly foretells the advent of the Prophet Muhammad. E.g. Genesis 21 verses 12 and 18, Deuteronomy 18 verse 18 and 33:1-3. Isaiah 11 verses 1-4, 21:13-17, 42:1-13 and others. For the Muslim, the Quran contains the words of God directly and verbatim revealed to Prophet Muhammad. May God praise his mention. Many confuse the Quran with the hadith, or sayings and traditions of the Prophet. The hadith is quite separate from the Quran. The Quran was dictated to Muhammad word for word through the angel Gabriel and immediately memorized and put down in writing. It is important to emphasize that the Quran was neither written nor composed by Muhammad. May God praise his mention. To hold such a view would contradict what the Quran says of itself and of Muhammad, that the Prophet is not speaking on his own but only transmitting the revelation dictated to him by the angel Gabriel. To suggest that the Quran borrowed from or copied from previous revelations, be it the Bible or otherwise, is, for a Muslim, an accusation of prophetic plagiarism, a contradiction in terms. The fact that there are similarities between the Quran and previous scriptures is simply explained by the fact that he who spoke through those earlier prophets is he who revealed the Quran to Muhammad, the one and only true God. However, the Quran is the last revealed holy book, which supersedes previous scriptures and the only one still available in the exact words and language uttered by Prophet Muhammad. Accountability and salvation. We have talked about God, about the human, and about the relationship between them. What about accountability? How can we humans, from the Islamic perspective, overcome sin? The Quran teaches that life is a test, that earthly life is temporary. Quran 67:2. The Muslim believes that there is reward and punishment, that there is life hereafter, and that reward or punishment do not necessarily wait until the day of judgment, but start immediately after burial. The Muslim believes in resurrection, accountability, and the day of judgment. For a Muslim, to demand perfection in order to gain salvation is not practical. It is demanding the impossible and is unjust. Islam teaches a person to be humble and to learn that we cannot achieve salvation by our own righteousness. The reconciliation of the sinful human with God is contingent on three elements. The most important is the grace, mercy, and generosity of God. Then there are good deeds and correct belief. Correct belief and good deeds are prerequisites for God's grace and forgiveness and for rising above our common shortcomings. How can sin be washed away? The Quran gives the prescription: if anyone does evil or wrongs his own soul, but afterwards seeks God's forgiveness, he will find God is oft forgiving, most merciful. Quran 4:110. Another moving passage reads, "Those things that are good remove evil deeds." Quran 11:114. Islam teaches repentance, stopping evil ways, feeling sorry for what one has done, and determining to follow the path of God as much as humanly possible. The Muslim does not believe in the necessity of the shedding of blood, much less innocent blood, to wash away sins. He believes that God is not interested in blood or sacrifice, but in sincere repentance. The Quran puts it clearly, "But my mercy extends to all things." Quran 7:156. The applied aspect. How about the application? Are we just talking theology? Since the human is God's trustee, it would be inconsistent for a Muslim to separate the various aspects of life, the spiritual and the material, state, and religion. We hear a lot about the five pillars of Islam, but they are often presented as the whole of Islam, many times in a shallow way. They are not the whole of Islam, many times in a shallow way. They are not the whole of Islam any more than one can claim to have a functional house composed exclusively of 5 concrete pillars of Islam: the testimony of faith, the 5 daily prayers, fasting, charity, pilgrimage, are presented by most writers as matters of formal ritual. Even the pillar that is liable to appear ritualistic, daily prayers, is a purely spiritual act involving much more than simply getting up and down. It has social and political lessons to teach the Muslim. What may appear as separate compartments of life simply does not exist for the Muslim. A Muslim does not say, "This is business and this is moral." Moral, spiritual, economic, social, and governmental are interrelated, because everything, including Caesar, belongs to God and to God alone. Muslim/non-Muslim relations. In conclusion, and against this background, what is the implication for the Muslims in their attitudes toward non-Muslims? To start with, and we must be frank about it, the Quran makes it incumbent on the Muslim to convey God's message in its final form, the Quran, to all humanity. We are not talking here about conversion. I do not like that word. Indeed, to turn to Islam, the religion of all the prophets in its final form, is not to turn one's back on the preceding prophets. It is an augmentation rather than a conversion, because it does not involve changing one's basic spiritual nature. In the Quran, pure human nature is a Muslim nature, which knows its Lord and wishes to submit to Him. The Quran states, "Let there be no compulsion in religion." Quran 2:256, my substitute for the term conversion is reversion, in the sense of a return to the pure monotheism in which we were all created. Thus the Muslim is taught to be tolerant toward others. Indeed, the Quran not only prohibits compulsion in religion, but it prohibits aggression as well, although it allows defense. Fight in the cause of God only those who fight you and do not transgress, for God does not like the transgressors. Quran 2:190. In addition, we find that within this broad rule of dealing with non-Muslims, the people of the book, is a special term accorded to Jews and Christians in the Quran. Why people of the book? Because the Muslim makes a clear distinction between a polytheist or an atheist and those who follow the prophets who originally received revelations from God. Even though a Muslim might point out areas of theological difference, we will believe in the divine origin of those revelations in their original forms. How should a Muslim treat these people of the book?
يا معلم.
Says the Quran, God does not forbid you from dealing kindly and fairly with those who have neither fought nor driven you out of your homes. Surely Allah loves those who are fair. Allah only forbids you from befriending those who have fought you for your faith, driven you out of your homes, or supported others in doing so. And whoever takes them as friends, then it is they who are the wrongdoers. Quran 60:8-9. An example of the second kind are the Islamophobe. In the world today, all believers in God are facing common dangers: atheism, materialism, secularism, and moral decay. We must work together. God says in the Quran, if God had so willed, He would have made you a single people, but His plan is to test you in what He has given you. So strive as in a race in all virtues. The return of you all is to God. It is He that will show you the truth of the matters in which you dispute. Quran 5:48. I hope, feel, and trust that there is sufficient common ground for Muslims and Christians to meet, understand each other, join hands, and move together in the path of truth, peace, and justice, the path of God.